Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio. I just heard myself. I know I say that every time, but that is it. That's my introduction. Hello everybody. Now, I've been having a lot of fun again with strips, with fabric, with sewing. Life is a joy. I've been doing Bargello. And it's funny actually because I'm going to be teaching Bargello at a workshop for one of my local quilt groups here because they asked me to do that this year. And then I end up doing Bargello for here as well, almost at the same time, which is quite interesting. At least it'll all be fresh in my mind, won't it? So it should all be good. But as you know, we've been doing a lot of collaboration work with Pam and Nikki Lintott, Pam and Nikki Quilts. And this is another one from their books. Now, this is the book it's come from, The Best of Jelly Roll Quilts. Now, it is in one of their other Jelly Roll quilts books as well, which is where this came from, the best of. But this is the book I've got at home. Now you can tell this isn't mine because mine has got lots of sticky tabs in it of all the quilts I want to make from it. And this was one that was marked Bargello. So it's a really nice, fun one. I've got one of the blocks here to demonstrate because the way they do it is in blocks. Now, obviously it's not my pattern, so I can't give away all the secrets from it, but there's really good, clear instructions. And there's some nice little top tips in there for pressing seams. And one of the things they do say in it, it's very much about fabric selection and the layout of those fabrics, which really make or break the Bargello quilt. And I would totally agree with that. And I think having sort of made this one now, if I did another one, I might choose to do it slightly differently. But I'm very happy with how this has turned out. So not to say that I'm not happy with this one because I am. Now the fabric I'm using for this one is it's Janet Clare, and it's her new range, Longshore it's called, and it's back to her nautical theme stuff with these lovely blues and this sort of sand colour and this cream. So that's what I was using. Now when I was asked to do this, the fabric wasn't available actually in terms of, so I was just working with the samples that we had because as I said I was doing this ahead of time before we received any of the fabrics. So I had to sort of work around because the sample fabrics aren't very wide and aren't very big, but it worked really well, and particularly doing this block style theme, which is how they've done Bargello, it worked really well for that. So if you haven't got jelly rolls, long strips, it does work with shorter cuts. Now the other thing I will say, without giving away too many secrets, is they work with half strips, and I also think that's a really good idea because you don't get the bowing of the strips quite so much when you're just working with a half width strip. And that's what I mean by a half strip. So basically, if you cut a fat quarter, a strip off a fat quarter, that's sort of a half the width of the full length of fabric. And as I said, I think for this, that makes it a lot easier as well and keeps your sewing all nice and straight and stops the bananaing that can happen when we're working with long lengths. So that's enough chatter. Let's actually sort of get on and have a look at how we do this. As I said, I can't give you the measurements of the cuts, but I can show you the principle of how the block comes together. So we're using jelly roll strips. So the whole principle of this is we make strip sets. And so I'm going to do that here. Now I chose to lay out, and if you can see what I've just removed there was a tiny little bit of a post-it or a sticky note that says 1, because one of the other top tips they say is actually label your quilt, the order. So this is the order that I chose to lay mine in. Now, when we get a bit further along, you'll see I've started to sew some, just so that this video doesn't end up being too long. And then I've got the rest of that will go like that. So that was my colour order. And so I made strip sets with the same colour order. Now, because we're working with jelly rolls, you won't have exactly the same fabrics in all of your blocks. So what they say is just go with fabrics that match together, that are of the same value, that work together. And that's what I've done here. And you can probably see that a bit more in here if you have a look at this navy blue one. They're all sort of a dark blue, but slightly different patterns, but it'll all read as a dark blue. So I hope that makes sense. Now, the other thing they ask you to do, as well as your jelly roll strips, is choose 2 accent fabrics. And I've chosen a grunge. Well, I didn't. It wasn't just me. I need to credit Jenny on our shop floor here, who was brilliant. I was wandering around. I'd picked this fabric, this turquoise, to go in with it. And I was wandering around the grunges downstairs, trying to find a second one. And then she came over with a bottle of fabric and she went, "Hey, Jeanette, what about this one?" and it was this lovely gold one, and it's absolutely perfect. I really love it. So thank you to Jenny, who was very, very helpful and put me out of my pain because I was there for quite a while going, oh, that's not quite right, oh, that's not quite right. But we decided on those. So that's the Jenny fabric and that's the Jeanette fabric. So you want something with nice high contrast because that's what's going to give us those lovely waves that go through the quilt. So having decided what our strip set is going to be, take a photo because that's always handy. Even when you're labelled, I take a photo as well. We're just going to sew these together. Now I tend to sew them in sets of 2. I think in the book they say, you know, keep adding, but, you know, whatever makes sense to your brain. I tend to be a sew in sets of 2 girl, so I'm just going to pin. I know you're shocked. I'm using more and more pins. I never used to use this many pins at home. I don't have to far to walk at home. I'm normally sat down at my machine, so things don't move about quite so much. And then 3 and 4. And I've always got these to refer to if I get out of order. But I tend to always do bottom fabric onto top. I get into the same routine, right onto left, bottom onto top. Then I sort of know where I am. So we're going to take both of these to the machine and we're going to sew them 1/4 of an inch. Do test your 1/4 of an inch seams as well because that is important. So let's start there. Now we can just chain piece these through, and all that means is we just don't cut the thread in between, we just keep sewing. And then once I've got my set of 2, I'm going to add it to the next step. Now I'm just going to finger press for now because we'll take it to the iron in a minute and press it properly. Now I'm just going to check my order. So this tan one goes next to the gold. And then we're just going to add our other bit, which I have sewn ahead of time. There we are. So there's our strip set, all sewn together with our number 1 at the top and our number 10 at the bottom. Yep, 10. I don't know why I doubted it was 10 then. Now we're going to press these, we're going to press the seams, and what they suggest is you press the seams in alternate directions. So that seam has gone down, so that seam now needs to come up. I'm just going to flip that round so I can get to this side a bit better, because what tends to happen is you keep catching the iron with the seams you've just done. So I just go back and make sure they're going the way I want them to. There we are, that should be good. We need one final seam. We need to turn it into a loop. And I always press first before this seam. It's easier to press while it's flat before you do the loop. Now I'm just going to quickly press that seam, but I'm not going to worry about which direction it's going to go in for the minute. Right, so we just want this to lay as flat as we can get it. So basically there we joined number 10 strip to the number 1 to make a tube. Now, like I said, I didn't worry about that seam. I'll sort that one out after we've cut. So now we can cut. Now it's looking like it should. So once again, I am going to line up one of my lines on my seam. Now you could do it on your edge of your fabric. And if you're lucky, you might get a line, hold on, where am I going? That's on the edge and a seam. But we want to get our cut straight. There we are, that's where I'm going to line it. And we're going to cut. Now this one I need to trim off a little bit on that side. I'm only going to do a couple of cuts and then I'll fast forward. But you just follow the instructions for the sizes to cut. Let me just do a couple here. And you just keep moving along your strip set. Now if you were working with a half strip set, you would have a bit more. I think these are only about 13 inches in length, so you'd have about another 8 inches to cut. But you just keep going along your strip set and cutting them into pieces. Now once you've cut them into pieces, they will tell you which seams to open to bring them out flat again. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So this is the beginning of my next block. These are my cuts, and I'm just going to make sure I've got it the right way round. Now that's not looking like the next piece. Is it that piece? Yes, it's that piece. That's looking better. And then that's going to be my end piece. So on this one, we've opened the seam between that piece of fabric and that one, and then each time you move down a seam until you get to the middle, and then you start going back up again, and that's what gives us those V shapes. So that's what I've started doing here. So let me just get my seam ripper here. So if I was doing this one again, it would be this block here. So I'd be opening up the seam between, I think that's my number 1, my number 10, my number 9 and my number 10. Now at home what I did is once I'd actually cut a strip set and I had a little thin piece, I left that by the side of me with my number 1 at the top and my number 10 at the bottom, so I could keep referring back as to which colour goes where. So on this one, it's the seam between those two fabrics, because that needs to be at the bottom and that needs to be at the top. But they do give really clear diagrams and instructions of which seams you need to open. And this is why we put it into a loop, so that we can just sort of unpick one seam. So you can see there, those two pieces are the same. So once you start off, you can just sort of see where you're going and move down a seam to unpick the next, and just follow, like I say, the instructions for the sizes and then how you lay that all out. And then you will have rows, which will be your connector blocks. So let me just open the seam on that one. And then these, you make all these blocks, and then these lengths get used to join the blocks together. So hopefully that makes sense. But it's a really nice fun one to do. Once you get I think the time-consuming bit with me was choosing where the fabrics were going to go. Once you got it to this point, it went really, really quite quickly. So that would be our connector strip. Okay, so hopefully that sort of explained it well enough without making it sort of too cryptic. But like I say, it's not my pattern, so I can't give away sort of too much information on it, but hopefully just enough so that you can see how that goes. So let's just move those two pieces out of the way so I don't get confused. Let's put them under here. And let's just finish sewing this. So I've got this strip to add to these pieces, and then that whole block is going to go together like that. Now, because we've pressed those seams in opposite directions, it means that these now are going to nest. we don't have any seams that fight with another seam. So I think they sort of say in the book you don't even need to pin, you should just be able to match. Now I tend to start by just pinning a couple at the top. And then you can just sort of whiz. So let's take all that to the machine and get that block finished. Now when it comes to these, what I tend to do is pull the fabric down so this, and then sort of push it back up so that that seam is right up nice and snug to the next one. This one, I'm going to lay it and I'm going to sort of pull it towards myself and keep it flat. And I use these fingers out here to hold the seam up there as well, just to make sure it doesn't move. So once again, I'm going to come beyond it and then push that back up into it. And you can feel it, it should lay nice and flat under your finger. It's all sewn, and if we have a look at our junctions, yeah, they're more or less spot on. I'd say more or less, they are spot on. So it actually does nest together, and I think they say in the book you don't need pins, and they're quite right, you don't actually need to pin them. It does work really well. So I'm going to just take that to the iron and press, and then we'll pull out the other blocks that I've already made, and we'll have a look at how it is looking. Now on these, because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to sew it together, I've just pressed all the seams to one side. I think what I've done, because I'm going to do it in rows, all the top seams I've pushed to the left and all the bottom seams I've pushed to the right. So when I come to join the rows, they'll nest. So that's how the block looks. So let's have a look at the rest of it. So there's one already made with the connector row already in there. And then that's going to go together like that. So you can begin to see that wave, particularly in the gold, really stands out on this one. But let me just bring up, because I've done another couple of blocks here. I'm going to run out of room on my surface, but we'll do it. There it is. But what I really love about the way Pam and Nikki have done it in the blocks is it's really versatile. It means you don't actually have to stick to that size quilt. If I wanted to do, I think they do a 3x3 layout. But on this, you know, I could keep it as those four. I could do a 4x3 or a 3x4 or a 4x5, because you can just keep adding blocks, and it's really versatile that way. What I will say though is to see the pattern really well, you do need a few blocks, because one of the things I thought about is that you could put it into a runner. That way, I would need a connector block there to make the pattern work. Still see the pattern. If I use different fabrics here, you would definitely see more of a pattern. I think if I brought more of the gold or some more of the light down here, but you get more of the impact of the pattern when you have sort of several rows of it rather than just one long row. But hopefully there, you can begin to see what that looks like. But it's a really nice, fun one. It's actually quite simple. It's quite a lot of straight line sewing. Definitely listen to the tips they put in the book, because it did make sure that those seams were matching and nesting. But I really enjoyed doing it, and I'm now really looking forward to the workshop I'm going to be doing with Florence Quilters. I'm going to give them a name check, Florence Quilters, very soon. So Hope you enjoyed that. If you do, give it a go, or if you've already done a Bargello quilt, do share your photos with us, with the community, basically, with all of us here, everybody else that's sort of watching, because sometimes we need inspiration, and different colourways make things look different sometimes. So thank you for that. Thank you to Pam and Nikki for allowing me to sort of demonstrate their blocks. They're always clear instructions, and it's always a joy to work on any of their patterns, and a privilege, I feel. So thank you ever so much. Do join us again next time here in the sewing studio.